Good morning. So where we are is on Yud Beis Amud Aleph. Yesterday we stopped right by the wide lines, just to remind everybody what the Gemara was saying yesterday. So the Mishnah had told us various laws about brachas. This is the Mishnah on Yud Aleph Amud Aleph, very at the bottom. The Mishnah had said that if you have a long bracha, you don't make it short. If you have a short bracha, you don't make it long. In places where it has a chitom and signs over the baruch, then you don't take it out. If it doesn't have a baruch at the end, then you don't add. And now we're exploring a little bit more about brachas. And what we talked about was two different cases. One is a case where somebody has wine in front of him, but he doesn't realize that. He thinks it's beer. And he starts out making a bracha on beer in his mind. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. In his mind, right now, this is beer, and he's going to finish shak on the Abedvari. And then he realizes it's wine, and he's seeing with the chamra, and he says bar priya gefen. In that situation, the Gemara says it's pashit that he's yaitze. Why? Because had he finished the bracha that he had in mind when he started, which is shak on the Abedvari on the beer, he would have been yaitze. Why? Because any bracha where you say shak on the Abedvari, ultimately you're yaitze. Conversely, if he had shechra in his hand, and he started out making a bracha adaita the chamra. He thinks it's wine. And then siyim the shechra. And then he finishes off with shahako. So then the question is he yotze or not yotze? Because since he had beer in his hand, and he started out making a bracha of bar pregef, which would not be yotze for the shechra, the fact that he was chasam correctly, is that sufficient or not? Do we go after the psich of the bracha, the ikar bracha, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, you have in mind at that point, or how you actually messiah sign the bracha? That's the Gemara's question. On that, the Gemara thought it could bring an answer, and the answer the Gemara thought it could bring is from how you say the first bracha of the Shema. In the morning, you say the bracha of Yotzer V'Choshech, and at night you say Ma'avarav. But what if somebody in the daytime, he thinks it's night, so he starts out saying Ma'avarav, but he ends up saying Baruch Hashem Yitzhak Ma'eretz. So he finishes off by the day. Or vice versa. Somebody who in the middle of the nighttime ends up starting out, instead of saying Ma'avarav, starts out saying Yitzhak V'Choshech, but he finishes off Baruch Hashem and Ma'avaravim, so he finishes off correctly. Is that sufficient? Is that okay or not? That the Gemara says in this brisa, it says it's basically after how you concluded. However you concluded is fine. So if in the morning you started out by saying Hama'avarav, you finished off Baruch Hashem Yitzhak Ma'eretz, it's good. If you started out saying Yitzhak V'Choshech, when you finished off Ma'avaravim, it's not good. And at night, if you started out saying Yitzhak, but you finished Baruch Hashem Ma'avaravim, it's good. And if you started out saying a Ma'avram and you finished off Baruch Hashem Yitzhak Ma'eretz, then it's not good. So the Gemara says a klal from this brisa, hakol halach achar achitim. That's what the brisa is telling us. You always go after the end, and therefore the Gemara says, therefore it's a raya. Then a situation where you have the kasa, right, the shechra, and you start out being adaited and mevarach chamra, right? You start out having in mind you're going to make a bracha on the wine, and see him with the shechra, then you finish. So then it should be fine. Why? Because if you say which you made a joke yesterday, that's what you also use. Not a joke. But fundamentally, it's very deeply serious that he's also say in relation to Ne'ilah. But fundamentally, in terms of brachas, if you go after the end of the bracha, so somebody's a kasa the shechra, he starts making a bracha adaita the chamra, but he's seeing with the shechra, should be fine. He finished off with beer, he finished off shahakal, he should be good to go. Good, this is what we got to yesterday. So now we're up to the wide line. And Yud Beis Amud Aleph says the Gemara, so we have a good raya. Then we know that 100% in that situation he should be Yaitz because he finished off Shein Shahakal on the Abedvar. Says the Gemara, no, it's not a proof. Shani Hasan the Gemara Baruch Yaitz Hama'iris. There's a very, very big difference between saying Shahakal on the Abedvar and the beer and the situation of the Berachos Kriyash Shema. What's the difference? The difference is that when you are saying the bracha of the beer, you don't have another baruch. You have one bracha. You start out thinking that you're going to finish off by Pregef, you finished off Shakal Nemitvari, and that's all you have. But that is inapposite. You cannot compare that to the situation of somebody's making the first bracha of Kriyat Shema. Why? Because the first bracha of Kriyat Shema ends off with either in the morning Baruch Atah Hashem Yitzam Haaretz, or in the evening Baruch Atah Hashem Ma'avaravim. So you end up making another bracha when you finish that bracha of Kriyat Shema. So since you're making another bracha when you finish that bracha of Kriyat Shema, whatever you started at the beginning is canceled. It's canceled because you have a new bracha at the end of the bracha. You have another baruch. So it says to them, how are you comparing the two? Shani Hashem to come Baruch Yitzam Haaretz, or as I say, Baruch Hamavaravim. It's the same. You basically have a bracha that's canceling out whatever your initial mistake was. Says the Gemara, Rav Damakol Baruch Hashem Bas Garas Hashem Ein a Bracha Shabir. It makes sense according to Rav. Rav has a shita that any bracha that has no Haskaras Hashem, for example, if you look up earlier in the Amud we had yesterday, right? Remember the Gemara said about the two dots of a Shabbos Masif and Bracha Achas on Shabbos when the Mishmar Yotze would leave. They would say to the Mishmar Nichnas, they would say a bracha to them. What's the bracha? Rav Chelba, they would say to them, Amr Mishmar Mishmar Nichnas Misha Shokan Neshmei Bebayis Hazeh Yishkem Benechem Avar V'Achva V'Sholim V'Reyos. We call that a bracha, but there's no shame, there's no malchus, there's nothing here. So according to Rav, that's not a bracha. We call it a bracha achas, but it's not literally a bracha. Why? It doesn't have the indicia of a bracha. What is required for the indicia of a bracha? The shame, the malchus. You don't have the shame of malchus, you're not going to have a bracha. According to Rav, it needs at least to have the word Hashem in there. If it doesn't have Hashem in there, it's not a bracha. This is not a bracha. You say, it's not a bracha. There's no shame in there. So according to Rav, who requires that every bracha that doesn't have Haskaras Hashem, that is simply not a bracha, right? You say Baruch Baruch Shema. It's not a bracha. There's no shame in there. It's not a bracha. Yes. So according to Rav, then when you say Baruch Atah Hashem Yitzam Haaretz, Baruch Atah Hashem Ma'avaravim, is that a bracha or not? According to Rav, it's a bracha because you have shame in there, right? You have Hashem. So once you have shame in there, so by definition, it's canceling out everything you said at the beginning. It's a new bracha. You ended off correctly. You said Baruch Hashem, Avrav, Baruch Hashem, Yitzam Haaretz. So you, whatever intentions you had at the beginning of the bracha, it's irrelevant now. You concluded correctly, and therefore it makes sense, according to Rav, that you cannot compare the situation, the first bracha of Kriyat Shema, to our situation of somebody who has a casa the shechra and he starts out making a bracha adai to the chamra b'avasim with the shechra. It's simply irrelevant. It's an opposite case because here you end off with a bracha. El Rabbi Yochanan Damakol Baruch Hashem b'malchus ein a bracha. Rabbi Yochanan disagrees with Rav. According to Rabbi Yochanan, it's not merely a situation that it's not a bracha if it doesn't have the shame. According to Rabbi Yochanan, it's not a bracha if it doesn't have malchus also. You have to have shame malchus and a bracha for it to be considered a bracha. So when you say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, then you have a bracha. You have shame and malchus. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, if you say Baruch Atah Hashem Ma'avaravim, Baruch Atah Hashem Yitzam Haaretz, you don't have a bracha because you only have shame. You don't have malchus. So then, according to Rabbi Yochanan, since you don't have malchus in the bracha that you're using to finish off Ma'avaravim and Yitzam Haaretz, so you don't have a real bracha at the end. So then, what is our situation? It is opposite to the situation of somebody has a casa of shechra and he's making a bracha adai to the cham v'sim in the shechra. Why? Because you don't have another bracha at the end to cancel. It's really just one thing. The fact you say bracha Hashem Yitzam Haaretz Ma'avaravim is irrelevant because there's no actual malchus in that bracha, so it's not a bracha. In which case, then you would want to say, according to Rabbi Yochanan, you should be able to bring a raya up that the ikar is how you are finishing, because you see that it works. If you say Ma'avram, Yitzam Haaretz, it worked. And you don't have a new bracha at the end, so it's not the ability to go after the chitum is without canceling because you have a new bracha. You don't have a new bracha, so therefore somebody has a kas of the shechra and he's making a bracha dai to the chambra of the shechra. It should be okay. That is at this point of the Gemara. So the Gemara says, Michael, now we're going to say Kontra Rabbi Yochanan. Elo, so Kontra Rabbi Yochanan, we're also going to say it's not a raya. Why? Ela kevan de Amar Rabba Bar Ula. Kidei lahaski minas yom balayla, minas layla b'yom. But according to Rabba Bar Ula, right, we have a special point for Rabba Bar Ula. We just said it on Yud Aleph on the base, which is we have a goal to be able to be masker at night the midah of yom and be masker by yom the midah of night. There's a special Indian in relation to that. So what did we say in order to make that? Remember the Gemara Yud Aleph? What did we say? We said that we start out in the morning by saying Yotzer Uvarich Hoshech. What do we say at night? Right? We say Maver Yom Umevi Loyla. Right? We talk about the girl Choshech. We talk about the midah of Yom by night and the midah of night by day. We want to have everything in there. So very nice. So according to Rabbi Bar Ula, that there's a specific need to talk about the day at night and night at day. So kikar my bracha umalchus meikar atarvayu ka'amar. When he initially made the bracha at the beginning, right? When he said bracha Hashem and he's doing it at night. Is he doing something that's wrong? Yes, of course. That's the day bracha, not the night bracha. But there's one important caveat, which is he's saying Yotze or Varich, which we want to have, right? If it's at nighttime, we want to have some element of the day being mentioned. So yes, he's not doing it exactly right. He should be saying not saying Yotze or Varich. Fine, but he's still bringing down the midah of Yom by night. Or vice versa by day, if he's guy saying Amav of him instead of saying Yertzar. So he's saying Galam the Choshev he shouldn't be doing. He should be saying Yertzar very Choshev. But he's still bringing the midah of Choshev by day. So since he's still doing that, he's still doing what you have to do by the bracha, and therefore, according to Rabbi Yochanan, when he made the bracha of Shem Malchus, he said Baruch Hashem Ken Bacham Yertzar very Choshev, but he's doing it at night. Or he said Baruch Hashem Ken Bacham Amav right Amav Dvar Amav of him. He's doing it by day, okay. But when he said the bracha, he's bringing in elements of the nighttime by day or by night, by bringing in the elements of the day. That is what you have to do. And so therefore, he's actually being yotze the bracha at that time. And the fact that he concluded incorrectly or correctly is irrelevant. Now, it's almost beside the point. Because the ikar aspect of the bracha, he was already yotze when he made the Shem of Malchus. He had the right intentionality by bringing in the nighttime by day or the day by night, even though he did it not in the right kind of verbiage. Nevertheless, it was sufficient. This then means that according to Rabbi Yochanan, you can't bring a raya from the fact that Rabbi Yochanan says that it works out okay when it comes to the Berachas Kriyas Shema to the case of the Shechra. Because the case of the Shechra, he had in mind Chamra. Who cares how he finished? He didn't have, when he was saying the Shem of Malchus, any of the right intention, because he was thinking about wine, not about the beer. Therefore, both according to Rav and according to Rabbi Yochanan, it simply wouldn't be relevant to say that just because by Berachas Kriyas Shema, if he did it wrong, it still works. It would have no right, it would have no impact on the case of the Pasa, the Shechra, and he was Mevarach at that to the Chamra of Asim the Shechra. Good? So now the Gemara tries another raya. Toshma says, no, I'll bring you another raya. What's the next raya? Miseifa, I'll bring you a raya from the Seifa of this Bryce that we just quoted. The Bryce said, there's a cloud. What's the general cloud? That we go after the end. We go after the way we are finishing the bracha. What is the Klal Yishol Davar coming to include? Klal Yishol Davar, we say it's coming to include something. What's it coming to include? Are we not coming to include this example, the case that we just said, that somebody has a kasa, the shechra, and he starts to be mevarach adai to the chamra v'sim the shechra? Isn't that the situation of what we're coming to include? Says the word loy. We're coming to include a different case. What is this case? This is the case of somebody who has bread and he thinks about the fact that he has dates. Right? So someone says, well, I understand what exactly happened here. Hey, Chadami. If, in fact, he has a loaf of bread and he thinks he's eating a date. How do you get that confused? I don't know. But let's say, so somebody has a loaf of bread. He thinks it's a loaf of dates. So he's mamish, he starts at awful pasach at the time. He's thinking himself, with a plan to say bar parades. But and then all of a sudden he realizes, oh, this is actually bread. So he says the correct ending. So he says, how much ours? That's how he concludes. So the Gemara says, Hainu be'en, bayin. That's our question. In other words, how is this different than the question that we just asked? In other words, if somebody has a loaf of bread, he thinks he has a date. So he starts on making bracha, and he's going to be finishing bar parades. And then he finishes, how much ours? That's exactly the case of a case where a cup of beer, he thinks he has wine. So he starts saying, Baruch Hashem Adai to the chamra, and then he finishes with the beer. The two cases are exactly alike. What is the difference? There's no difference, says the Gemara. So loy tzricha, it's the reverse. You're going to achol tam b'viksavadam. Really, what's going on here is he has a situation where a guy has dates, but he thinks he has bread, right? So he has a date loaf, but he thinks it's bread. So achol pasah with the na'ama v'sim with the tamrei. So he opens up by saying he's going to say Baruch Hashem Kalam Achalam, and in his mind he's going to say Amud Yomi. And then he realizes, oh, it's a date. So he says Baruch Eight. So the Ochaz is Yotze. Why is he Yotze? The Afilu Siyem B'Dinaam Nami Yotze says no, because even had he finished saying Hamaitzi Lechem Min Haaretz, he would have also been Yotze. My time, what's the reason you would be Yotze? Because the Tamri Nami Mezin Zaini, because dates also fill a person up. And this happens to be true even now. These dates are incredibly caloric, have a lot of benefits for people in terms of health, sure. But the Gemara is saying that the is lasuya, a situation where somebody had effectively dates. He thought it was bread, so he was going to say and then he's Messiah by praise. Is that good? Yes, it's good, because even had he said he would have been yaitza anyways, because dates are also maizen zayim. They also fill a person up and sustain a person the way bread would. What does that sound like to you? What's the case? Somebody has a casa de chamra, who's pasach b'deshechra, right? He was pasach b'deshechra v'siyam b'dechamra. So what do we say? Of course it's good. The Gemara opened up. Why would it for sure be good? Because if he would be Messiah b'deshechra, it would also be good. Because if you say shakal nebedvar, it's going to be working for anything. So it's exactly the same case. So what ends up in that situation? What do we not know yet? We do not know the opposite case. What is the answer in a case where somebody has a casa de shechra? He starts out being mevarach adai to the chamra, and he's messiah with the shechra. If he ends up having the idea that he's going to be making a bracha on the, he thinks it's wine, and he starts out with his mind on wine, and he finishes off with beer, which is the correct bracha because he has beer. What's the halach in that situation? We never answered that in the Gemara. Did you notice that we never answered that in the Gemara? That the Gemara ends up at the two dots here without knowing. Let's quickly run through Taisus, and we have to do also a Rabbeinu Yaina, I mean a Rif. We'll start out with the Rif because Taisus goes to the Rif. Look at the Rif. In the Dapei Rif, it is on page Vav in the Dapei Rif. If you look at the Rif, right in the middle of the page on the Dapei Rif, the Rif says, V'loi ifshita. The Gemara never came out clearly on the answer to this question. Ulakula avdinon. And you go Lakula, V'loi mahadrinan lei. And we do not go back, the Sveka de Rabbanon Lakule, because we have the Suffix de Rabbanon, you go Lakula, right? So we talked yesterday about Suffix Brachas, and now we're talking about a different point on Suffix. We're talking about Suffix de Rabbanon, Suffix of the Rabbanon, so we go Chumrah. Suffix de Rabbanon, we go Lakula. Here you have a Suffix Brachas. We don't know what to do. The Gemara doesn't say. If somebody had a cup of beer, he thinks he has wine. He starts out making a bracha when he says Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, he has in mind to finish Baruch Pri HaGefen. But then he switches to shakal, right, which is the correct bracha. Then we want to know, are you yaitz or not? Do you have to make another bracha or not? On that, the Rif is saying the Gemara never came out clearly. So since it's a Safek Rabbanan, we go Lakula. You do not have to go back. You can just simply drink the beer. Good with your shahakal that you had in mind in the beginning at the Elokeinu Melech Haolam, you had in mind in wine. No, it's fine. You finished off right. It's good to go. Move on. Let's look at the Rabbeinu Yomi here. The Rabbeinu Yomi is in the Divrei HaMaskil of Pesach, right? Pesach Ubirech. So if you look, it's about halfway down the page. If you look at the Rabbeinu Yomi here, the Rabbeinu Yomi asks a question. This is a question that's going to be relevant for us tomorrow, and when we get to the new parak, in terms of mitzvah shrichas kavana. So the Rabbeinu Yomi asks, I don't understand. He says, don't we hold that mitzvahs ain't tzrichas kavana? If mitzvahs are ain't tzrichas kavana, what do I care what you were thinking about? If you say mitzvahs tzrichas kavana, so I understand you were really worried about what you had in mind when you were making the bracha. You had in mind wine, you had in mind beer. What was your intention? But if your mitzvahs ain't tzrichas kavana, then who cares what your intention was? So long as you make the bracha correctly, in this case, you ended up saying shakal ni'abed farai. So the fact that you had in mind when you said Elokeinu Melech Haolam, you had in mind the wine, so what? You finished right. And when you say mitzvahs ain't tzrichas kavana, it should be fine. The Rabbeinu Yomi gives two different answers. So first of all, according to the Rif, he points out that according to the Rif holds in Rosh Hashanah, the Rif says mitzvahs tzrichas kavana. So maybe you say that for the Rif it's an issue. That's what we have to discuss. That's fine. But according to everybody else who says mitzvahs and tzrichas kavana, why are we so insistent on trying to answer this question? So there's two possible reasons, says Rabbeinu Yomi. One reason is, even if you say mitzvahs and tzrichas kavana, right? Even if you say that mitzvahs and tzrichas kavana, when are we talking about that we wouldn't care about the bracha? Says the Rif, that's when we're talking about a situation where you have a ma'isa mitzvah. For example, you have in mind that you're going to make bracha Elokeinu Melech Haolam, right? Hamatzi lechem min haaretz on your matzah, right? When you make hamatzi on your matzah, but you're thinking in your mind you're having bread. Is that an issue? What happens if it's the first night of Pesach? You have to eat matzah. What's the Maisa mitzvah that you're doing? Oh, for lulav, first day. You have to shake lulav. You're making bracha al netilas, you're thinking yadayim, but you have a lulav there. Is there any real care about the bracha? Is the bracha mekayim the mitzvah of the lulav? Once you pick up the lulav, you're to the mitzvah. If you make no bracha, you still be to the mitzvah. The bracha is not going to change the mitzvah. But in a situation where you have, like now, a beer or something to drink or to eat, there's no mitzvah here. The bracha is all you have. The bracha is the mitzvah. So says the first answer, Ben Yaina, maybe we say that there's a difference. We say mitzvah and tzrichas kavana. That's when it comes to like on Maisa mitzvah. You have to eat matzah the first night. So if you have in mind the wrong thing, you think you're going to eat bread. Who cares? You think you're making Antiyas Adayim. So what? The mitzvah is picking up the lulav. The mitzvah is blowing the shofar. The mitzvah is putting on the tzitzis. That's so, like the mitzvah is not the bracha. The bracha is very nice. It's a nice thing to have. But had you not said any bracha, you'd still be 100% yaitz in the mitzvah. So that's when we're going to say it's not relevant. You had the right intention, not the right intention. We don't care about your intention. We're going to say mitzvah ain't a tzrichas kavana. But when it comes to a situation where there's no ma'isa mitzvah, it's a rishus. You're just drinking the beer. So your whole, any essence of a mitzvah, the only thing is making the bracha. So if you got it wrong, that's when it would be a problem. Even those who say mitzvah and tzrichas kavana would say it's a problem where your only ma'isa mitzvah is the bracha itself. Then you can't get it wrong. That's one possible way, says Rabbeinu Yonah. The second possible way, says Rabbeinu Yonah, he quotes this from Rashbam. Rashbam Sochem says like this. Says the Rashbam, we hold mitzvahs and tzrichas kavana, sure. But that's only when you don't have anti-kavana. What is the comic strip where they have, in physics we call antimatter. But I know, isn't there like a comic strip where they have one of the bad figures is like the anti-man? No, there's not something like that? No? All right. But in physics you have antimatter, right? You can have matter and antimatter, right? So here you have a situation, we hold mitzvahs and tzrichas kavana. 100% says the Rashbam. But not anti-bracha. You can't have anti-kavana. If you made the bracha incorrectly when you're making, let's say on beer, you're saying a shahako, you have absolutely no kavana. No problem. It's 100% fine. You could have no kavana when you make the bracha on the beer, and it's totally a good bracha. We say mitzvah and tzrichas kavana. But when you have anti-kavana, you having in mind that you want to make a bracha on wine, and you're in your mind, you're making a bracha on bari pri gefen. So you're having anti-kavana. So even though I normally say mitzvah and tzrichas kavana, but that's only when it's going against a situation where there's no kavana, in which case we don't care. But if you have anti-kavana, you have kavana for something else, so then we wouldn't say mitzvah and tzrichas kavana. Those are the two types of answers that the Rif wants to give, the Rabbeinu Yonah wants to give. Okay, quickly, we got to get moving. So just to point out also the Taisus, which we didn't do, the Taisus of Loy Lasuy Nama, Taisus brings down the Rif, Taisus brings down the Ri. According to the Rif, we're Mekel. According to the Ri, we're Machmer. The Rif was Machmer l'chumra l'tzarach levarach pamacheres. It's a question on the Rif. Why being such a Machmer? Safik brachos l'kula, right? We don't seem to be so necessarily Machmer and require you to make another bracha. Nevertheless, the Rif does say it. One last thing to point out is the end of Taisus, where Taisus points out. One of somebody on Yontif, it's practical, right? If somebody says Mekadosh Sov instead of saying Mekadosh Sov he's saying Mekadosh Shabbos, or vice versa on Shabbos and Mekadosh Sov the Chazar b'Turkey de Dibor Yatza Achareshu Yedeshu Yontif. The person, as long as he knew it was Yontif, but he just made a mistake in the bracha, so we would consider it to be fine. So if somebody on Yontif is saying Mekadosh Shabbos, Mekadosh Sov right? Turkey de Dibor, that's fine, or vice versa. It will be fine, but fundamentally that's because you know that it's Yantif, and therefore you are able to say Tarif Libra and make up for the bracha. Last point in Taisus is V'Hikshar Rav Rabbeinu Yaakov Mikinun. My kind by lay v'had vade mitzvahs enisrias kavana. What's your issue here? We only say mitzvahs enisrias kavana. Marie, the Hainu b'Shemei Tefillah acharei beis hakneses when it's kavan lotzis. When we say mitzvahs enisrias kavana, that's when someone's going behind the shul. And he heard something. So you say mitzvahs enisrias kavana, and you can have biyotz aval hechad and the skavan levarch ala yayin v'nimtza sheich or loy mahani. Right? What does this sound like? When somebody has wrong kavana, this is the answer of the Rashbam. Tez doesn't quote it from the Rashbam. Tez is quoting from the Ri, but it's the same idea as what we just said from Rabbeinu Yonah, the name of the Rashbam Sachim. Okay, moving on. All right, we are at the two dafs. Now we have a whole series of Gemaras from Rabbi Bar Chinana Saba, right? This old rabbi, or Chinana was Saba, I'm not sure who was the old one, but in the name of Rav. What is the first halacha? Somebody doesn't say emes v'yatzim in the morning and emes v'emunah at night. Rashi explains emes v'yatzim because of all the chasam that Kodesh Baruch Hu did for us in saving us from the Egyptians, and emes v'emunah at night, meaning that Kodesh Baruch Hu is going to one day bring us to the Mashiach, etc. So then lo yotze dechavos. Then you're not mekayim design your mitzvah of Shema. Shema requires you to have also brachas at the end, and that requires the bracha of emes v'emunah at night, and emes v'yatzim by day. Why do we have this? What is the source for requiring this? You have to talk about Kodesh Baruch Hu's chesed by day and his faithfulness at night. When somebody is davening, when he's going to be now bending down to daven to make the first and the second brachas, right? When you bend down and the last two maidim and b'chel achayim. So how do you do it? When do you bend? You bend by the baruch. Right? What we do is we bend by baruch, then we bow, and then we zakev by Hashem. So the Rabbi Chanina the Rav says that you do this at baruch in terms of the bending, and you stand up straight by when you say the Shem Hashem. So Amar Shmuel, my timer. So Shmuel says, what's the reason that Rav said that you do this way? My timer, the Rav. Hashem Zekev Kefufim, like we say in the brachas, Hashem, he is Zekev the Kafuf, right? Hashem straightens out those that are bent. So the Gemara asks a question, Meisvei Mipnei Shemi Nachasu. It says in the pasuk, the word nachas here, it doesn't mean like have a good nachas from your kids. Like Rashi says, it means machnia. It means to be bowing. Right, it means to be machni yourself to the Rebbeinu Shalom. So the Gemara says a question: Mibnei Shemi Nachasu. You're supposed to be machniya by the Shem Hashem. You're supposed to be machniya. So why are you saying that we're getting up by the Shem Hashem? Shouldn't you be machniya by the Shem Hashem? Shouldn't you be bowing by the Shem Hashem? And the Gemara says no. Miksiv bishmi. Does it say that you are supposed to be nachas? That you're supposed to be machniya by the Shem Hashem? Mipnei Shemi ksiv. It means before the Shem Hashem you're supposed to be machniya. So in other words, Baruch, you bend. Ator, you bow. Hashem, you're able to be zoikif. And that's in Mekayim. You're machniya yourself before you get to the Shem Hashem. So Amalei Shmuel L'chia bar Abba. Shmuel says to Chia, L'chia bar Rav. Shmuel says to Chia, the son of Rav. This is Rav, right? Bar Arion, right? The son of Torah. And here he's literally calling him a Ben Torah, but not because of the way we use it. He's calling him a Ben Torah because he's the son of Rav. Rav is the Torah. So that's what it means that he's calling him a Ben Torah. He says, I'm going to tell you something good, something geschmack that I heard from your father. Now, you remember the Gemara that we had before in Chesam and Aleph. Right over there in Chesam and Aleph, Rava said in the name of Rav from my papa, to please tell me something in Mahani Milya Ma'aliyasa that you heard from Rav Chizda in relation to Tefillah. So here Shmuel saying the Milsa Ma'aliyasa, he's telling him he's telling the son of Rav. Shmuel is telling the son of Rav, right? Ostensibly, remember, understand this. Shmuel and Rav, right? They're the competition in Bavel. Right? How not only do they get along, Shmuel's telling Rav the Torah of his father, telling over the son of Rav the Torah that he heard from Rav. He said, I'm going to tell him something geschmack about davening. What did he say? Hachem Ravuch. When you bend, you bend by the baruch, and when you stand up straight by the Hashem. By the way, if in your Gemara you have the bottom, you have a Rabbeinu Chananel. If you look at the very last line of the Gemara, of the Rabbeinu Chananel, you'll see there in one line he says, and our question about the bracha of somebody who had a kasa the shikra, and he had in mind a diet to the chamar, he was the sim of the shikra. So he says the Gemara doesn't answer the question. Mil behedjaloi itmar. Nevertheless, since it doesn't say clearly, v'yesh mishayim lekula. There are those who say lekula. That is the rach that Tais is quoted in Loy Lasinaham that we just had to skip over. Okay, we are now turning the page. We are in Yud Beis Amud Beis. Rav Sheshes ki kara kechizra ki kazok kichiyuva. So when Rav Sheshes would bow by the Shemona Esrei, he would bow like a rod, right? Like Rashi says, like a shevet. It's like my Rebbe used to hit me, right, in fifth grade with the ruler, slap, right, straight down. There was no bending, there was no crouching, there was no arcs. It was straight. But he would get up like a snake. He would get up with his, you look at the picture of rattlesnake, right? He picks up his head. He's like looking around. The tongue is coming out, right? He's slowly up. He doesn't like go straight up. It looks like this. Why? Because you don't want to show that it's a masui, right? Remember, we had already before many times masui. You don't want to show like things are a masui where we had the gemaras before, right? It's daimalav kamasui. If you run out of shul, if right, certain things are making it out that you're not really so excited to be here. So one of those things, if somebody like jumped up like a rubber band after they bowed, it would seem like maybe they're not so excited to be bowing for the Rebbeinu Shalom. So you go down straight, fast, but you come up slowly. Right? You come up slowly like a snake would. Important to note here, the Taisus Kara Kechizra, looking at the second half of Taisvis, Taisvis says the Rosh Hashanah V'Yom Kippurim Sha'anu Sheichin Kol Shah B'Tfilah. What happens by us on Rosh Hashanah Kippur, right? Brought down Shulchan Aruch. You're supposed to be bowing the whole time by Shemona Esrei. You sometimes see people, their mamish take it all the way serious, right? Their mamish all the way bound, mamish the whole time. So, okay, but everybody should be used. Normally, when you daven, is you have to balance different things. When you're standing for the Rebbeinu, you have to stand honorably. On the other hand, you have to mechni yourself. So the way I heard it is that you stand up with your shoulders straight, but your head down. But Rosh Hashanah Kippur, during that time, you're supposed to be much machniah, so you're mamish crouching more, says Taisus, but then you might have a problem. What might your problem be? Because when you're actually now having to bow, it's not going to be clear. You're already in the bowing mode. So Taisus says that you have to make sure when you're getting to the place, when you're ending the bracha, you have to make sure that you're standing more straight. You have to make sure that you're being clear about when where you are, because we're going to say later on in Gemara Lamed Daled that if people who look to bow by all the brachas are not allowed. You tell me you're not supposed to. Only the few times that we have in the Shemona Esrei, that's it. So a person should be clear that he's not bowing at any other point in the Shemona Esrei. I would also add that also you have to make sure that you're actually appropriately bowing. It's not a bow if you're already bowing. So you have to also be zaykif before the end of a bracha where you have to bow. Like say v'chal achayim or something like that. Make sure that you're in a position to actually bow. Okay, next. Continues the Gemara. Another Gemara from Rabbi China in the name of Rav. The whole year, person says Akel HaKadosh and Melech HaYishdako Mishpat. Chutz Mim'asar Yom Shebein Rosh Hashanah V'Yom Kippur, except for the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Kippur. During the Aseres Yemei Tshuva, Shem Mispal HaMelech HaKadosh VaMelech HaMishpat. Then you say HaMelech HaKadosh and HaMelech HaMishpat. Rabbi Lezer disagrees with this. Rabbi Lezer says, "Afilu Amar Akel HaKadosh Yatza." Even if you say Akel HaKadosh Yatza, and he has a beautiful raya. What is the raya of Rabbi Lezer? Shenemar, and we say this: "Vayikva Hashem tzavah Yisba Mishpah Akel HaKadosh Nash B'Tzedakah." Amos say Vayikva Hashem tzavah Yisba Mishpah. When is HaKadosh Baruch Hu lifting up in judgment? Eila Sayam Shemer Hashem Yom Kippurim. V'Kamar Akel HaKadosh. And look what it says in the pasuk: Vayikva Hashem tzavah Yisba Mishpah. When is Hashem lifting up in judgment? The Akel HaKadosh, they call him Akel HaKadosh. He's Nitnash Mitzedakah. So if you call him Akel HaKadosh, then we could say Akel HaKadosh. If that during Rosh Hashanah Kippur, that's the time when it's the Mishpat, and we call it Akel HaKadosh. So that's fine. If you still say Akel HaKadosh, it's okay. It's not a problem. So my Havel, so what was end up deciding? Rav Yosef Akel HaKadosh and Melech HaShdaka Mishpat. So Rav Yosef says, yeah, you can say Akel HaKadosh and you can say Melech HaShdaka Mishpat. It's okay. Rabbi Amar, no. HaMelech HaKadosh ve'HaMelech HaMishpat ve'Hilchos like a Rabba. You have to say HaMelech HaKadosh and HaMelech HaMishpat and Halacha like Rabba. So where do we end up with this right now? What we have is a machlokes, but it's fascinating because we pass on like Rabba. We say you have to go back. We'll see this in a second. But isn't that amazing that we end up right? How do we end up saying the bracha of Atik Kadosh by Rosh Hashanah Kippur? What do we say? We end off with this pasuk. Right? But we literally say the pasuk of Akel HaKadosh as the proof of the time that now is he's now Melech HaKadosh, but it says Akel HaKadosh in the very pasuk. That's what Rabbi Lezer saying. I don't understand. Of course you can say Akel HaKadosh. No, we say we don't. We're gonna have to say Melech HaKadosh. Yeah, okay. First Taisvis, the very important Taisvis Halakha L'Maisa. because Tais adds in a whole bunch of things that we didn't know about yet. Says Tais, the Tzarech Lachtam Hamelch HaKodesh, Hamelch HaMishpat, V'im Lo Yom HaMachzir Noisai. You have to say Hamelch HaKodesh and Hamelch HaMishpat. If you don't, you're going to have to go back. V'chein Zachreinu, U'michamoicha, V'chosoiv L'chaim Toivim, U'v'sev Chaim, Machzir Moisim Lo Yom. If you don't say all those things, you have to go back. Is that how you grew up? Did you grow up and you have to go back and say the Hoshman Esri again if you don't say it? No, you did not. How is that possible? You have to see the end of Taisus. The because you changed the Matbea Brachos that the rabbis told us, so therefore you're going to have to go back. And that's a Rabbi Yehuda Paskin if you have a suffix. If you said it, if you didn't say Machzir, Yerushalmi. Why? Because we learned in the Yerushalmi that the only time you get a chazak in brachas is if you said it over 30 days. If you didn't say over 30 days, then you don't have a chazak. If you have a suffix, you have to go back. What do? We all do the meaning of the Maram. What does the Maram say on Shmini Atzeres? What do? You say Masha Baruch Menagesh 100 times. That's to get you 30 days in one day, but you get it. You said it so many times, and that's what we do. Now we say Masha Baruch or whatever tune you use for Masha Baruch Menagesh Malakafas. You say that tune. Why? Because effectively you're getting it a lot of times, so hopefully it'll help you to remember. But what I want to finish off is the end of the Taisvis. What Taisvis says as follows. The Rach, if you look at the end, Rabbeinu Chananah talks about the Ein Machzir and Isai, Mikolas and Dvarim Zloi Pasuk B'Sefer, B'Ferish, V'Evraz right? Rabbeinu Chananah says, and I didn't see it in the Rabbeinu Chananah that we have by us. Could be on the side that says name. It's not Rabbeinu Chananah, but whoever it is, what Taisvis includes is that there are those that say you don't go back for all these things, right? Only on what the Chazal say you have to go back on, which would be Akel HaKodesh and Hamelch HaMishpat, but not on if you forget Zachreinu, B'Sefer Chaim, whatever, you wouldn't have to go back for any of that. Okay, so we are now to the next Gemara of Chinina Saba. Anybody who has the ability to ask for rachamim for his friend and he doesn't ask for rachamim, so he's called a sinner. Shneimar, as the pasuk tells us, Gam anoichi chalila limechatol Hashem mechadol l'espal b'adchem. Shmuel says to the Jewish people that God forbid that I would sin to Hashem and not daven for you. You know, they're asking for a king, and now it's going to be a split, right? No more of the Sheifta, no more Nevi'im. Now they're going to have kings, but of course, it's going to keep on davening for the Jewish people, because anybody who doesn't daven for somebody when they have the ability to do so, they are considered to be a chaytem. Amar Rava. So now Rava says the following. Yes, we are... we are in the middle of the narrow lines. If somebody who needs to be davened for is actually a Talmud Chacham, then you have to mamish make yourself ill over that person. If somebody's like in that level, you have to mamish make yourself ill. Right? If you're going to say maybe the raya is from where? The raya is from Shaul. Because Shaul was very upset at David. He thought David was coming to usurp his kingdom. And he's furious at the people around him. And he says to them, none of you are sick over me. No one's telling me where this guy David is hiding. Right? Shaul's going crazy. He's mamish. He's plotting. He thinks David is out to get him. Right? David's not out to get him. Right? David is just being David. He happens to be always, destined for success, but he's not out to get him. He doesn't try to kill Shaul once. But Shaul is like going crazy, and he doesn't understand why no one's telling him where is this guy hiding. So one of the lushness that he uses in the pasuk is ve'ein chayla mikamalai. None of you are sick over me. So maybe that would be the source that you have to be sick over a person who's a Talmud Chacham. So it says, no, that's not a good riot. Dilma Melech Shiny. It's not a good proof because that's the David HaMelech. Shaul HaMelech. Shaul is the king. So maybe by a king you have to be getting yourself sick over, but a regular person maybe not. Rather, the sources from a pasuk in Tehillim where David HaMelech is saying that when I was sick over them and I was dressing in sackcloth. And over there, the psukim there are dealing with Doeg and Achitophel, who were the main enemies of David. They were terrible to David, but nevertheless they were still made into Chachamim. And David saying about them, right, when they were ill, levushi sak, I was dressed in sackcloth. I was getting myself sick over them. So that would be the source for people who are not kings, but regular Talmidei Chachamim, that you're supposed to be ill over them. That is the next memra from Rabbi Barchinan of Saba Mashmei Rav. Now we have another one. Whoever does an avera and he's ashamed, so we forgive him for all his averas. A long passage from Yechazkel that when somebody is ashamed, so there won't be a piskan peh anymore because of your shame. So if somebody has a din on an avera and they're ashamed of it, then Hashem forgives them on all the averas. How does this fit with the Gemaras in Yuma? Where is the tshuva here? The shame is obviously including in here the tshuva and all of that, and that's why somebody's going to be machal on all of his sins. What do you mean all of his sins? Some sins you can't be getting forgiveness just from that. Okay, we'll have to explain all of that when we deal with the Gemaras there in Yuma as well. So the Gemara says, but how is this a good proof? You want to make a proof that there's a principle. Anybody who has done an aver and he has a shame, so then he's going to be forgiven for all his averas. Maybe this is talking about a tzibur. Over there, that pasuk there in Yechezkel is dealing with tzibur shining. Maybe that's dealing with the tzibur. We have to have a new source. What is the new source? Then Shmuel said to Shaul, when Shmuel the night before he passed away, he is there on Mount Gilboa. He goes to see a witch, the witch of Eindor, to figure out what's going to happen to him tomorrow. So Shmuel, and I don't want to get into here whether or not he literally came up or didn't come up. It's a huge machlokes in the Rishonim and the Gaonim, and not for now. But whoever it is that they call up Shmuel to speak to Shaul, so Shmuel says, "Why are you getting me annoyed? Why are you bringing me up to talk to you?" He says, "I'm having a lot of trouble. The Pelishtim are fighting with me. Hashem sarmei alive, and I'm trying to figure out what to do. Nobody's answering me. Not Nevi'im. I'm not getting any answers." But the Gemara says, he didn't mention about the Urim V'tumim. Why didn't he mention the Urim V'tumim that not getting him an answer? Because he killed out Noiv. Of course, the Urim V'tumim is not giving an answer. He doesn't know Kahanim anymore to deal with him. So what's the raya that you see the shame? The shame is he didn't want to mention the Urim V'tumim. So you see that he had shame. But what's the raya? There was machlan on all of his averes. How do you know that they forgave him? So the Gemara has two different sources. One is tomorrow you and your children will be with me. What do you mean you and your children will be with me? Imi, says the Gemara, right? It's like you will be with me up in heaven. You're going to die, or I have good news and bad news. You're going to be dead, but you're going to be with me in heaven in my area, meaning that you'll be forgiven for your sins because you had the shame. Rabbanan have a different source. What is the Rabbanan source? Later on, there's a whole Maisa in the Givainim, without getting into the Givainim more. The Givainim had been in they tricked the Jewish people. They tricked Yeshua into give them a peace treaty, but they were really Canaanim. Anyhow, their job was to be wood choppers, water carriers for the Jewish people, and they did it in the Mishkan until Noiv was killed out. When Shaul killed out Noiv, they lost their livelihood, so they died. It was 3 years of famine at the end of David's life, and at the end of David's life, with this famine, he tries to figure out what's going on and says you have to make forgiveness for the Gevainim. The Gevainim say that they want to kill 7 of Shaul's kids in order to be able to forgive them. So the pasuk says, "Vayikunem laHashem give Shaul." We're going to hang him up and give Shaul Bechir Hashem, the chosen one of God. So as Rashi points out, Yotz Zabaskavam Bechir Hashem. They didn't say, the Gevainim didn't say that Shaul was the chosen one of God because they would never talk like that about Shaul because they hate him. He's their implacable enemy. So they would never talk about him like that. So what, in fact, must have happened? What must have happened is that they said, we're going to hang them up and give Shaul. And the Baskal came out and said, Bechir Hashem, the chosen one of God. So you see from here that Shaul's embarrassment of using of not quoting the Urim V'tumim because he had killed out Noiv was enough to get him to be called the Bechir Hashem. Okay, continue the Gemara. We have to go very quickly. Amar Rabbi Avot ben Zutrosi, Amar Rabbi Yehuda bar Zvida. Bishul Gbar Parshas Balak b'Kriyat Shema. They wanted to include Parshas Balak in Kriyat Shema. Why didn't they conclude the Parsha of Balak in Kriyat Shema? Because it's really, really long, and it'll be Tirkan Tzibur if Shema was that much longer. So my time, why did they want to actually include Parshas Balak in Kriyat Shema? If they wanted to include it because it says by Yitzias Mitzrayim, Parshas Ribis, Parshas Mishkoles. So then let them talk about other parshas, the Parsha of the weights of Ribis, also the Sibba and Yitzias Mitzrayim. It talks about the Jewish people, or Hakadosh Baruch Hu is like crouching down. So it's like V'shachmachav Kumecha, and like Hashem is taking care of the Jewish people in the same way like a lion would. So therefore, if you wanted to talk about that, because it has elements of lying down and elements of getting up. So then maybe just say this pasuk and don't say another psukim. Says no, I can't do that. Give me the Kol Parsha, the Paskim Moshe Rabbeinu, Paskin, Paskin Moshe Rabbeinu, Paskin. We can only say parshas that Moshe Rabbeinu gave us the parsha, but we cannot break up parshas. You can't break up the parshas. Why not? Because Moshe Rabbeinu didn't break them up. Okay, we'll stop over here. Just to point out, is that true? We say Vishamu on Friday night. Vishamu is the middle of a parsha. We break it up, no problem. We say Vishamu. We say Nishmasar, no problem. You open up in the morning, you say Matevu. Matevu is from Parshas Boach. You break it up, no problem. We have a separate idea in Chazal, which is not this one, which is called Psuka, Deloy Paskin, Moshe Rabbeinu, Deloy Paskinan. You can't break up a pasuk, but a parsha. Since when you can't break up a parsha? We have to leave that as a Torah and have a wonderful day.